planning on being here, I believe.
We are now recording.
Thank you.
Okay,
I expect Brooke will join us soon. It's 1:00 on Monday, October 27th. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. I am Janet Hurley, the chair. I will ask board members to introduce themselves as I see them on my screen. Sarah.
Sarah Had, board member. Hello.
Brooke.
Brooke Dingeldine, good afternoon.
Kirsten.
Kirsten Sultan. Hi, everyone.
And Alex Weinhagen.
hi, everybody. This is Alex in the room.
Thank you. That's all 5 of us. Are there any agenda updates that we need to make? I do have one. I invited the Chittenden County and Northwest Regional Planning Commission executive directors to speak to us at 1:15. So I would entertain a motion to add that to our agenda.
I'll make a motion to add an agenda item to welcome visitors from Northwest and Chittenden RPCs at around 1:15.
Thank you. Sarah?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And that is unanimous. Thank you. We have no public present, so no comments on non-agenda items right now. We have consent agenda, review and approval of October 15th, October 16th, and October 20th meeting minutes, the 16th being the pre-application meeting in Rutland, the other 2 being regular board meetings. Kirsten.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes from the meetings dated. One moment here. Apology, guess I wasn't quite ready. October 15th, October 16th, and October 20th to include any edits discussed here.
Okay, thank you. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Brooke. And there was one edit that Kirsten sent about all day, and I agree that that should be struck. Those day long, I think it was, from the October 16th minutes for referring to the site plan. Were there other needs for revisions? Okay. Then no discussion. Let's go for a vote. All those in favor of approving those 3 sets of minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. All right, operations, budget, and legislative updates. Pete has sent our list of legislative fixes and a couple of wood products suggestions and the Tier 1A enforcement suggestion to the committee chairs of jurisdiction. Do you have anything else on that, Pete?
Yeah, I'll just say, legal is looking over, in terms of drafting some of that language, both drafting and reviewing. So, we'll get more there. I guess I would say, happy to bring that to the board at a meeting, but I think, we really need to think of it more conceptually because once, legislation gets, next door, it will invariably change, et cetera, as it goes down the pike. But I do want to make sure that you all have some eyes on it and are comfortable with kind of where that lands.
Right, and what you sent, we had already, you know, seen and approved as what we would like to pursue, as far as the details were presented. Kirsten?
So just to mention about the components of legislation related to the wood products manufacturers report. Jenny has today sent me some draft language, and she and Pete, blanking on who else, are meeting on Friday to go over that. So that's still kind of under development to bring back, I think, to the board for review and discussion, also together with the one other policy component which pertains to log yards. So that's still underway.
Yeah. And I think your email to the chairs explained that, didn't it, Pete?
Yes, yeah, that
Okay.
there's, language to be drafted and, there was some, notes about that, potential language there in that, document that you all have been working off of, but, that we'd be happy to flesh that out a little bit more for, the legislators.
Okay. All right, anything else on legislative matters?
Not for me.
We submitted our budget exercise as requested, that being, bumping up our special fund revenue forecast for fiscal year 27 budget, to account for the overage over 3% increase in our budget. And operations, we continue to work on the return to office planning. We have scheduled, or we've held one regional office meeting. Others are being scheduled as we speak. And we are working on some information that will go out to staff, as well as sort of seating arrangements, which will be informed by these meetings, and, sort of priority or sort of how to decide who is where, when, those kinds of questions are being, they're still being worked out. Part of what we need is an indication from A&R as to whether we will have additional office space in Essex. And it's hard to finalize those office plans in Essex without that. For instance, will we have another office that we will need to order for office furniture for? However, in Montpelier, I think we are able to move ahead with moving things out and moving things in to accommodate people as we currently foresee working in there. When's the Montpelier meeting? Is it Wednesday? Is that the one? Yeah, we were just talking about it. It's Wednesday. So Brooke, are you able to make that meeting in person on Wednesday?
Yep, I can be there.
That'd be great, because others of us are otherwise occupied on Wednesday. So if you could be there to represent the board, that'd be great.
Jenna, actually, I looked at my schedule and I have it programmed in, so I'm planning on being in person as
Oh.
well.
Okay, that'd be great for both of you to be there, I think. So thanks. And I'm actually a little bit confused after emails back and forth this morning as to when the Essex meeting is going to occur now. Do we know, Pete?
Yeah, so Essex is planned for noon to 1:45 on Thursday, the 6th. I haven't had a chance to connect with Sarah. I know you were interested in attending that, Sarah. And you've got some, conflicts there too, so I say that's what it's planned for at the moment, but, if we need to change things, we can do that. It's just, difficult scheduling. There's a lot of folks involved and a lot of differences in schedules and trying to find a gap there. But certainly for folks that aren't able to join the particular meeting, have reached out and just said, please let us know your concerns in advance, that we can talk about them and we can follow up with folks afterwards too, but.
So the canceled Essex office thing was not that? What was that?
Yeah, there was some scheduling snafu a little bit. I had staff put in a request for the meeting rooms.
Okay,
And
so it
it
was
went to
just a meeting
everyone.
room cancellation.
Yeah, it went to
I see.
everyone,
Okay,
so.
okay, so I can attend the beginning of that meeting, but I have to leave for another meeting. Are there other board members who know that they can attend? And actually, I would be attending remotely, not in person.
I will be attending remotely. Unfortunately, I just, there's absolutely no way I can attend in person. I'm disappointed in that, but that's unfortunately,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, what about you?
Well, so Kirsten and I both have a Criterion 8C working group meeting
Oh, that's right.
scheduled for that same time slot, so.
That's right. Okay.
Assuming we keep that, both of us will be occupied.
Brooke,
I'm sorry, I've lost track of which time slot we're talking about.
noon in Essex on Thursday next week, the 6th.
And this is a portion we can flip flop a little bit too, but the noon is just to
I can
have
do that.
informal lunch as well.
I can be there in person. No worries.
That'd be great. Thank you, Brooke. So bring your own lunch, bring your brown bag.
Yeah,
Okay,
bring your own lunch and no set agenda for that portion, then we'll move into the return to office discussion after that.
okay,
Oh, yeah.
thanks. So it might be that I might miss the whole thing then, because I have a 1:00 meeting, so depending on, how long lunch takes.
Yeah,
We'll
we
see,
could
I guess.
potentially flip flop that if we need to.
You
So
mean have
let's-
lunch after the
Yeah,
RTO meeting? Oh, I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay,
or, yeah,
all right, well, we
So-
can talk about that offline.
Right,
Yes.
and could
Okay.
you keep me in the loop, because I do want to be there for that meeting, but I have other things I'm trying to juggle. So if you
Yeah.
could let me know when the meeting is, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
that's great. Yeah, connect with you, Sarah.
So anything else under operations, budget, and legislative from anybody?
Is it, were you wanting to discuss the, executive order and the BNRC letter?
Oh,
Or maybe you might
I
not
guess
be
at some
there yet.
point,
Yeah,
so VNRC, sent a notice to me and, other appointing authorities, I guess, that, challenge the governor's authority on certain aspects of the, executive order on housing. Some of what they identified were very similar to what we had already identified as the 3 areas of concern that we notified the governor's office about. We subsequently met with the governor's council and others on staff and discussed the 3 items on our list. Pete, I didn't reread the VNRC letter before this meeting. So I'm not prepared to get to compare, contrast, and discuss really, but maybe we should put that on our next agenda so that we can come prepared and we can provide the VNRC letter to those who haven't seen it along with the memo that we sent to the governor's office as part
Janet,
of our meeting materials. Yes, Alex?
so you were kind enough to forward that on to the rest of the board when you received it. And I'm not looking at it right now, but my recollection was that the NRC was requesting that, that you comment on the issues that they brought up that are relevant to our organization.
Yeah,
So I think the fact that we've all seen it and that we've already issued a response to the governor even ahead of that, I would be totally fine with you responding to them if you felt it was appropriate and simply providing them with the correspondence that we sent the governor and telling them that's as far as we've gotten. I don't
okay,
think it really warrants anything more than that at this point.
okay. I'm good with that. How about others on the board? See nods.
I'm fine with that approach.
I was just trying to eyeball it again because I didn't remember anything outside of the issues that we had identified, but I'm just taking a quick
They
look.
talked about wetlands, the wetlands piece, but that doesn't really affect us, so,
Yeah, I think that was more about A&R.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we should, I mean, no reason not to forward them the memo that we sent.
Okay,
You know, there's no need to write some big long letter or anything. Just say, thanks, we identified similar issues and have
There
already
they are.
addressed
Yeah.
it or something.
yeah. You're good with that, Sarah? Okay, I'll do that. All right, we have Charlie Baker present. Charlie? We can give the floor to you to discuss with us how to conduct the site visits for your pre-application from the CCRPC. And do you know if Catherine will be joining us?
I expected so, but I don't see her, so maybe not.
Okay, well,
I
let's
don't know.
start with you.
All right. Thank you for the time. I think Catherine and I had some conversation, and yeah, thank you, Janet and Pete. We had a little bit of conversation at the end of the week, last week. And I think if I could boil it down, and I really wish Catherine was here because she'd be a much better communicator than I'm going to be right now. But you're going to have to live with what you get here. But I think to boil it down, I think we're concerned from a couple dynamics about us running the site visit process. At one level, I think is just the amount of work, like in getting, and I appreciate that Devin is on the board of his bus company and was able to get a bus and karaoke entertainment and everything the whole way. Sorry, though, for the minutes, I was, oh, yeah, somebody put a smiley face after that. But I think it's going to be more complicated for us. And honestly, it was just, we're trying to get a lot of other things done. And the pressure on the staff was like a little overwhelming for our staff to try to figure out how to do all this. Secondly, I think we just have, and maybe we're being overly cautious, but just open meeting concerns, you know, and just trying to avoid. It sounds like guys did a good job the first time, but just ex parte communications and things that are said in the site visits that somehow need to get brought back into the public meeting portion. And so we're just very concerned about our ability to really do all that for you or with you. And so anyway, maybe I'll just let that rest there. I think I should also say, like, totally encourage you. Oh, and there's Catherine, who I know, that's right, Janet, she had a meeting right before this. So Catherine, I just introed this topic by saying we had a couple concerns. Just the amount of effort and logistics involved for our staff to do it, and then the open meeting issue. So I don't know if you want to add any more detail or color to that.
Not having heard what you said, I would just say that those were the two items, yes.
Just in response, I think the open meeting issue is not an issue. Site visits are exempt from the requirement to record. They are off record. And we produced a script in which we explained what ex parte communications are, and we, say, don't engage individual board members in discussion that not everybody can hear. And we can provide that to everybody. It's to me, it's a non-issue, the open meeting law issues. Sarah.
I think just to add some detail and some clarification to it in terms of evidence taking too, is there were rather detailed handouts that were presented at the site visits that encapsulated the information that was provided. And so those were logged in and now they're in our system as part of sort of the application materials received and what have you. And then I think that there was some statements that were made that were worth repeating once we got back and we were on record back at the RPC. And so I think there was information that was conveyed that way and officially made it into the minutes. So I feel that that was a comprehensive way of dealing with it. And I think that, Janet, you were fairly diligent about repeating for the different people that came and went throughout that process, just those ground rules, and that they were abided by and we didn't really need to enforce them.
Right.
Those are my observations.
And then any information that was shared during a stop, the board members brought to the meeting and said, just for the record, we talked about sidewalks here in Castleton, and we talked about the narrowness of a planned growth area extension on a downtown, and so that discussion became part of the record because we brought it up at the meeting. So, and then there were materials that were passed out at the Killington site that we indicated to the developer if he wanted us to consider them, he had to submit that to the record. So, yeah, we aren't concerned about that. So we are concerned that we don't want to be making things untenable for you, right? So, we can take on more of the organizing of this. I would still ask that you work closely with the board designee to decide, on a few sites that are representative of your regional mapping approach, I guess, and that those be areas that that we are focusing on areas that are proposed for Tier 1B in particular as part of those site visits. And that, as to, yeah, it doesn't mean that, as Charlie explained to Pete and I last week, you would prefer to give us the kind of analysis that was provided in those Rutland Regional Planning Commission site visit packets in the meeting, and that you would be prepared to do that. And that's perfectly fine. I think the main idea of these site visits is to give board members and anyone else who's interested a feel for the geography of the place that we're going to be making decisions about. So it's not that we need to have particular information at each site, even as we just need an understanding of where we are considering categorizations and whatnot on the landscape, boundaries for various land use areas and for Tier 1B jurisdiction. Sarah.
So I'd like to just sort of walk through some different alternatives. potentially and just throw them out there. I think that the site visits were valuable because it offered us a ability to actually sort of see and be on site and experience some of those areas that we had questions about. I think there are other ways of meeting that, and if the RPCs did want to instead focus on an in-person meeting and presenting evidence that way, with Google Street View and things of that nature, there are ways to do a virtual site visit with the board. I think some of the other things that we had talked about was that the board could do one by ourselves to the sites if we wanted to split up and do it that way. That would not be as inclusive of the public, which one of the things that I liked about the site visits that we conducted in Rutland were they were fully inclusive of everybody that wanted to participate. So I think there are ways of alternatively receiving the information. But I just want to sort of put it out there in terms of a discussion about how we can equitably do that for participation purposes and also recognizing safety issues, because I think that there were discussions about, well, if we didn't take a bus, we took individual vehicles or something of that nature. Caravanning, particularly at sites that might have marginal pedestrian access or things of that nature, could be potentially dangerous. So I just want to sort of throw out the different options for potential discussion in terms of if there are other ways rather than doing the sort of large bus that we did in Rutland.
Any other board members have comments on this, Brooke?
Yeah, I just want to chime in. You know, I have the old saying, if a picture paints 1,000 words, a site visit paints 1,000 pictures. And I've always been a really huge advocate for site visits, just so that you have the context and the lay of the land. I unfortunately was ill and was not able to make the Rutland site visit, but I was at least relieved that I know the area and many areas within Rutland County pretty well. I spent 30 years in the area, so for Chittenden, for me, I think it's, of course I know Burlington, but it would be so useful. I also am not concerned about the ex parte piece. All of the board have an ethical obligation. They understand ex parte and conflicts of interest. And while there may be polite conversation or collegial conversation, I think that we all understand that we need to be very careful about receiving information without the rest of the audience being present. But site visits are so critical. Anything that we can do to help facilitate those and make them less onerous would be terrific in my mind. So I really value them tremendously and would love to go.
Kirsten?
Janet?
Oh, Alex, go ahead.
Well, so I was just gonna ask Charlie and Catherine straight up, like, what is the most problematic issue with the site visits that we can help overcome with you? Is it securing a bus, or is it the staff time to create some level of packet information? Which of those is the real problem, or are they both? That I think we can help.
I would say both of those. And I would say that I am not as convinced as all of you that the open meeting law question is not a question that is concerning with the site visits. So for me, it's all three. Even though you all feel comfortable, I remain unconvinced about that as a concern. So it really, but leaving that aside, it is both the bus and the packet. And
So to clarify, the open meeting issue is our issue to address, right? It's our meeting, and so we'll take the hit on that if there's a hit to be taken. So I appreciate your concern, but like, I think we can deal with that. But as far as the packet goes, I wasn't clear from what Janet was saying, and maybe this is you, Charlie, that your staff is interested in preparing some kind of a packet, but for presentation at the public meeting, not during a site visit. Is that where you're at?
I will say the discussion with my staff, who, you know, number one, honestly, and I'm sure you guys share in this, you know, we're just a little bit wrung out and, you know, and overworked, and, you know, even if we're getting paid, and I'm sure you guys are too. So, you know, I don't want to say we're special or anything. But so it was just, yeah, it was just kind of another little mountain to climb in the path, you know, the trail that we're on here. That was a little overwhelming, maybe at first. And honestly, I think when I talked to my staff about it, like, you know, we did not map. You know, this isn't a development where we like field identified the wetlands, right? Like this was almost all GIS exercises that we were going through and working with our towns through. And so, yeah, I think we'd rather spend more time looking at the maps and the process that we went through. And Brooke, I don't mean that in any negative way about what you said. I get it, particularly if you're not familiar with an area. It's really helpful to drive around and get a little feel for it. And I don't want to discourage the board or members from doing that either. It was just like it felt like another event, like we're planning two events, a bus trip and a public meeting. And it's just kind of overwhelming on our staff, to be honest. And I don't know, Catherine, how you guys are coming up sooner than we are, Catherine. So you may have more feelings than we do.
Okay, so it sounds like it's less the creation of the packet, the maps that go with the stops, than just the overall having to organize the site visit as a whole. I hear you. Okay.
But it's also, we're also, you know, had a conversation internally about like, how is it fair that we're giving you additional information for some of our communities that is not in the application packet for other communities? And should we be concerned about that? I don't know if we should or we shouldn't, but if it's information you're going to need, it should be part of our application. And if we provide you with additional information, it should be because you have a particular question that has arisen in the review of the plan and you need additional information to help with your deliberations. But we were just wondering the balance of proactively providing additional information that's not part of a requirement and isn't necessarily the same for every community. Does that make any sense?
So
Okay.
I think, you know, I worked out the site visit plan with RRPC, right? And I had, you know, looked at the map and a little bit before doing this, and there were things that popped out for me. And what we were looking for was a route that we could accomplish in 3.5 hours, right? Number one. Number two, stops that addressed some of the questions that came up in my mind, right? Not that those were the only places that those questions popped up. There are other communities too. And so I don't think that the packets of information put any other town at a disadvantage or an advantage. These were representative of issues that came up in one board member's mind, right? And this is the pre-application. This is not the final determination. And what the pre-application is going to provide is a response, and it's going to say, you know, most everything looks great. Here's a couple of things that, you know, you might want to reconsider before you bring this back to us. And then I think most of the focus is going to be on the map, right? And so here are some map issues that we have and really need you to think about and then you go with that. And then we have a hearing after you have adopted. And that hearing, I don't think any of us are anticipating that we're going to have site visits, right? This pre-application phase is let's try to find the salient issues and let's try to get them addressed before you come to us with a final application. So I don't really feel like there's a problem that, there's a little bit more information in the record now for Castleton than some of the other towns, for instance. So it's a pre-application review. We are looking at all of the towns. We are looking at all of the Tier 1B areas as part of our review. So I'm not worried about that. And so I guess because we need to move on for this meeting, what I would ask is that each of you work with Catherine with Kirsten and Charlie with Sarah to come up with a workable plan for the pre-application meeting. And, it may be that we take on a little bit more of the work for this site visit. Sarah.
I think, just to be clear, I think in terms of what we're supposed to be working on, just to get a read from the board, would a virtual site visit provided by the regional planning entity with potentially our board conducting its site visit by itself be acceptable?
I'll go.
I mean, I kind of have a problem with us conducting a site visit without it being a public event like
All
we
right,
had
so
at
then
Wetlands.
would just a virtual site visit, extending out the length of the meeting and giving the RPCs more time to do a virtual presentation, to the point in terms of the ArcGIS exercise, potentially using Google Street View, some of those sort of remote sensing ways of providing a site visit. Would that be an acceptable way of addressing this issue?
Kirsten and Brooke, do you have answers to Sarah's questions or do you have your own sites? Okay, go ahead, Kirsten.
Well, just a couple things. So a virtual site visit, given this planning context, although I completely agree with what Brooke is saying, the picture paints 1,000 words. But I think for this exercise and plan review, I actually myself would be fine with a virtual site visit. And if that helped address any questions about sort of fairness and equity, and it could be done for, say, every Tier 1B, that would be perfectly fine with me. I did also want to mention, Sarah, you mentioned a safety concern with like a car caravan. Yeah, I think if people are trying to follow one another along the route, but I think if the site visits are planned in a way where you have a clear route map and you have sufficient parking for what's that expected parking need is, and you go, we're at location A, everyone's traveling to location B, I think that can be done with sort of typical traffic safety. So yeah, I would be fine with doing a virtual option. That's just my own.
Just sounds like a lot of work for the RPC to me, but like, I sort of am going back to what Brooke said, picture 1,000 words in a site visit, 1,000 pictures. And, if you just pick 4 places and go to them, you're done, as opposed to looking at every single Tier 1B area that may be proposed in a day-long meeting. Brooke.
Well, I love site visits and I think they're very useful. I think we should be responsive, and I'm not sure we should be mandating how the Regional Planning Commission presents their pre-application or application. I have no problem with the virtual thing. It may be much better to be able to see all of the 1B areas. So I'm not fighting this at all to the death. I really want to be responsive to Catherine and to Charlie, because I don't want to create yet another hurdle of,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
I hear that. I do think that we cannot do virtual site visits for every single tier 1B, proposed tier 1B area. There's just too much. I think even a virtual site visit would have to pick a few places and as representative and sort of go through those. So, Sarah.
Yeah, I think that's perhaps the way to go. I think you just echoed some of what I was going to say. And I think that the other thing, just of particular importance, particularly with our next stop, NRPC, as that is my geographic area as a board member, that's 2 counties. You're not going to be able to get to Richford and Isle Lamont and tackle everything in between. And so I think the idea of having a virtual site visit provides the ability to, I think, do as what was done before, Janet, where we can, as the different board members assign, work with the RPCs to try and identify areas where board members are having questions to focus in on. But provides that we would be able to get to, or at least get an overview of the particular towns that we want more information on, as opposed to letting the sort of geography and times dictate it. Just because that is the next one up is a 2-county one, and that is a geographic and time problem, I think.
So how about we let Catherine and Kirsten and Charlie and Sarah work out how this is going to happen for these 2 applications, pre-applications, I should say.
That's
Sound
great.
good?
Thank you so much for the consideration. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Thank you.
We know you're
Thanks for-
busy too, and
Yeah.
you guys are our partners in this, so we're
thank
happy
you.
to make it work for all of us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Kirsten.
Can I just ask one final question, maybe before Catherine and Charlie sign up? Alex, not to put you on the spot too much, but did you have any particular preferences for in person? No.
I'm
Okay.
happy to go with the majority. So yes, I'm happy to let the designees work it out. And if it's virtual, that's fine. Yep.
Okay. To be continued. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
All right, studies and reports. We have further discussion on the draft appeals study and report. And a criterion 8C discussion. Sorry, we're 13 minutes late into this, but Brooke, do you want to lead the appeals discussion?
thanks. Yes. So I gave a lot of thought to the comments that we received from Zachary Handelman at last week's public meeting, because he made a really important point about the inconsistency of taking it on the record town and then turning it into a supplemental with more evidence kind of appeal. And the reason why I give this a lot of thought, and he really hit the nail on the head, is because when you do an on the record appeal, you get a transcript of the hearing, and that's sent to the court with all of the documents that compose the record. And what happens is the parties brief the case and they argue why the decision below was right or wrong. And the issue that I got confused on is, well, wait a minute, we're pulling both of these cases in if we want to consolidate them. And it was in that instance that I was trying to land on one standard of review for both of those different portions, or the 2 cases that are going to have to be decided independently, but they are consolidated in one for a hearing. And what Zachary was explaining is, it's like, wait a minute, there's no hearing. So you're not going to take evidence on the record appeal. So I'm proposing that we listen to Zach. He made a lot of sense, corrected my snafu error of thinking about it the wrong way. So what I'm proposing is, well, and the other issue that he made is that he's like, Brooke, I've never seen a consolidation of an on the record town zoning appeal with an Act 250 permit. Well, that's because there would be no hearing to ask for a consolidated hearing. So I kind of had a brain cramp on that whole thing. So what I'm suggesting is, here's our chart. You know, we're keeping that, we're going to rename it, but we're agreeing on all of the district commission and district coordinator decisions. But when we get to a municipal appeal, the only opportunity to pull a zoning permit appeal over for consolidation is if it's coming out of a de novo town, a town that has not elected to go on the record. So the question is, we're not going to have those as consolidated, nor do I think it makes sense necessarily to pull them over for consolidation. So that's one question. Do we even bother bringing them over to make these on the record decisions? Or do we leave that at the court? Because if there's no purpose of transferring it because it's not going to be consolidated for trial, then there's no need to do that. We were trying to make sure that we were addressing the desire to offer consolidation, but it's not going to
So,
even be that.
so we had left it up to the applicant to make that request, right? And would there be any other benefit to the applicant, from the applicant's perspective, to send them both to us versus sending one to the court? Maybe.
You know, it's a whole different standard of review. And not that, and, you know, if we take any of the tier 1A or 1B housing, they might be coming out of on the record review towns. So we may have to operate. I mean, you know, we're taking the record in those cases and then allowing further evidence, right? So it's just a little bit confusing. We are not going to be, well, okay, let's look back at the chart because I'm getting myself confused. We have municipal appeals that we wanted to pull over for consolidation. They possibly come from two different types of towns. Now, if we were to take tier 1A and 1B housing, there are going to be on the record towns and there are going to be de novo towns. And what we were proposing is take on the record and keep it on the record, which is not a hearing. It's deciding if the lower tribunal was correct or not. And the de novo towns, we were doing the supplemental. We want to honor what happened below, even though normally you get a de novo. It's almost akin to de novo, as long as there's a good reason to bring in new evidence, it's not duplicative. So we're kind of dealing with having to implement both standards anyway, because we had decided to stay with that on the record review for those towns. It's a small number, but do we continue to take on the record? We're not converting that to supplementary. But the de novos are going to the supplementary review. So I guess we will be taking on the record. Sorry, I have to think this through on the fly. But if we're taking on the record anyway, that is the standard of review that we will have to become familiar with and know how to review. So I guess it's still, if there's a perception, because we're not allowing any discovery, and sometimes even on the record at court can be they can run into some procedural delays because of reactions or requests for discovery and that kind of thing. So maybe we continue to give it to them, but we stick with the on the record and supplemental for the de novo towns.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Purpose of it is not for consolidation. It's just to give the opportunity for possibly a quicker result.
Do any other board members have a response for Brooke on this? Kirsten?
I guess what I'm not understanding readily, and probably it's somewhere in the data within the draft report, Brooks, I apologize, but just help jog my memory on the timeframes currently for the appeals of on the record. I'm just trying to understand the big picture landscape of how many towns are on the record roughly, and then how is that going at the court now? I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
so
those.
it's a handful, very, very small number, maybe half a dozen. Is that
That's
right?
what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think so.
Janet, something
I
like
think
that.
it is around 6, isn't it? Anybody else know?
Well, and it's going very poorly from what I understand. And I think Zach mentioned that on the record reviews at the court actually take longer because of the transcription issue at the front end. And I think you see that in the court's guidelines or guidance for how long the disposition should be for different types of cases. And it's like 360 days or something like that for an on the record review, which seems backwards, right? It should be the other way around, but yeah, so very few number of them, and the court's having difficulty with them partly because of the transcription issue.
Alex,
I
do you
think we should
know?
take them. I think we should do exactly
Yeah.
what we had previously talked about. We're gonna take these, and there'll be 2 categories: on the record appeals and non on the record, which will be the supplemental review standard.
But could the board do a board appeal process for those municipal on the record decisions without running into the same transcription issues?
I think so. I
Well,
think
I guess
that
Brooke's shaking her
Zach's,
head.
I think Zach's points about how are you gonna be able to reference particular testimony if you just have an audio version of it. I think there are ways to address that, and it doesn't have to be a transcription to make that possible. And if the court can't figure that out, I think we can. I think the technology exists, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I think we can. So I think that's one way we could do it faster.
I'm going to respond that I have concerns about, we're not just talking about writing some board rules. You would be talking about changing, chapter 117. And that's why it seemed like opening up a can of worms to some extent. And the other thing is that this is not like a district commission that we have control over, and we can control, what is the record? Is it getting recorded? And we have custody of that information. I would not want to step into the shoes of having to produce a transcript. Now, the PUC does that, but they do it for their own hearings. And maybe I'm showing my age because maybe they don't do it anymore. But so I'm concerned that we might be trying to administer, a system that is set in statute and it's other entities. It's municipalities that we don't have any supervisory control or. So I want to be cautious about. We already know that there's a problem right now with on the record reviews. They are, I think he said, taking 90 days if you can get on the list of waiting to even get your transcript done. So it's problematic. How do we fix that? I don't know. I'm not sure that necessarily it's something that we can fix. Maybe the answer is to say, don't do on the record. You know, as a recommendation to the towns. I mean, if it's that much of a problem, I know there's AI and I know all of that, but AI is dependent on the recording to begin with, and you know, and recently the example that I was given during the stakeholders process, I think it was Chris Roy was saying that they had a situation where the tape was lost or corrupted or something, and they didn't even have the recording, and they were trying to figure out alternative methodologies. So I know it seems very easy to resolve with AI these days, but a human still has to sit and verify every single word that's on the page if you're going to use a transcript. Now, having said that about the on the record, on a de novo review, it's I mean, on a supplemental review, it's different because, you know, if somebody wants you to look at what was below, they can point it out to you, but it's not limited just to that. So if you lose something on the supplemental standard, you can fill the gaps. And that's the strength of it. Even if you lost the record completely, you basically would do a de novo review to supplement what was not there.
Sarah?
So just sort of a risk analysis, 10,000 foot level, whether or not it takes a month or two to do transcription, perfection of the record, that's all on the municipality. That's not on us to produce. That's part of that municipality deciding to take on the record review, and that's their obligation in this process. Now, I think the other thing too is whether, I think grander scheme of things, if there are really less than half a dozen municipalities that do on the record, and if this is elective for them of whether or not they want to come through, there are lots of ifs there. So I think that this is an area that we take it the same way as we do de novo, because to me, there's not a fair way of determining between the two. You know, I think if we take one, we have to take both. And I don't think the probability is too high that we will get a lot of on the record reviews. And I think that that's just one of those things, is sort of like how we make a decision. First, can we exclude on the record and have it be an equitable process for municipalities? I think the answer is no. And the second thing is, are we overly worried about something that's not likely to happen very often? I think the answer is yes.
So were you saying take on the record like as a de novo or as a supplemental? Or are you saying stick with on the record?
I'm saying stick with the chart as it is, which is with municipalities, it's elective as to whether or not they want to combine with an Act 250 appeal, whether or not they're on the record or not. That makes sense.
Well, it's the applicant who wishes to combine, but not the municipality. But the municipality is either on the record or not. Can you say that again, Sarah? Sorry.
I'll again refer to the chart as written, is that with municipal appeals, that it's an opt-in, and we allow people to opt in whether or not that municipality is on the record or de novo, if that makes sense.
I mean, it either is or it isn't. I don't understand why is it opting in?
Opting in for the combining of appeals is elective and going before our board as opposed to environmental court, I believe is the way that the chart was written.
For the applicant to have that option, right?
Right, but what does that have to do with on the record or not? Sorry, I'm being confused about this. Why? So there are, say, 6 municipalities in this state that are on the record municipalities. And if we get somebody who has a housing appeal from that municipality from a tier 1B area. We said that we would take that housing appeal on the record because it comes from an on the record municipality. Period, right?
That's
What's-
my understanding too, Jen, and it is per the chart, but yeah, I think it's as simple as you said. Yeah,
So,
Yeah, now remember, there's not gonna be an Act 250 permit for consolidation on tier 1A
it's true.
and 1B
So-
housing.
right.
So
and
let's say-
that's what's getting us confused, is that we're
Right.
mixing consolidation
Yeah.
with the question of just general appeals. So let's stop talking about consolidation for a moment and just
Yeah.
focus on regular appeals. And that's where I think it's very simple, as Janet sketched out. There's an appeal from a tier 1B area on a housing project. If there's no option, it comes to us. We are the only appellate body that hears it. And if it comes from an on-the-record town, it's an on-the-record appeal review. And if it comes from a non-on-the-record town, it's a supplemental review. I think it's that simple.
Okay. Kirsten?
So Brooke, do you see any issues with that? And if we were doing an appeal of a municipal on the record decision, and there was in these rare instances, also an Act 250 appeal, let's say the housing appeals went beyond those areas where, there's no Act 250 jurisdiction, say tier 1A, then we could do two parallel reviews, or
Yeah, one
the
would
on the
be
record
just-
review of the on the record decision, and then in parallel, the decision concerning the appeal of the not on the record Act 250 decision. Is that,
Yeah.
but oh, go ahead, because
One's just like writing a decision, reviewing papers, right? And the evidence, and then writing a decision about it. The
Yeah.
other one may or may not have a hearing. I mean, it's possible that evidence could be put in and a hearing is not necessary or requested. But typically you'd have the hearing for the supplemental evidence, if there is any. And so that would be your findings and conclusions. You're writing the actual permitting decision, as opposed to saying whether or not a town was right or wrong in an on-the-record review. But you do both of them. And because you were familiar with the facts of the case on the one, even though you're not trying them both at a hearing, it helps to inform the board and, saves resources even though they're not being litigated together. Better use of resources for one entity to review the project and make both decisions.
But when you said before we were getting into chapter 117, like, I guess I'm not understanding
I'm
those.
sorry. Yeah, so what I didn't want to, what Zach was saying is, he's like, now wait a minute, you're talking about changing aspects or issues within zoning and how zoning operates, what the towns are doing and whether they have to prepare a record and blah, blah, blah. So when I said chapter 117, that was just shorthand for the the statute that governs our zoning, our municipalities and how they do zoning and how zoning is appealed. So I didn't want to put a monkey wrench in. I don't want to change anything that the towns are doing. I want them just to, so if we just stay consistent with the way they do it now, the less change in that respect, I think, the better.
All right, but what we're conceptually still talking about with the chart as outlined wouldn't require that we make those changes, right?
Well, no, we're not how we're now talking about doing it. Yeah, it was because I was screwed up.
Right. Yeah.
I got confused.
Trying to- Yeah.
So Zach was great. He came in and helped us to, avoid defeat. Because it was a really important point, and I appreciate his input tremendously. Alex has his hand up.
Apparently,
Yeah,
his
thanks.
virtual hand.
I figured it was easier than just butting in from the room. So I heard two comments that I thought we could chat more about. One Zach made and the other Catherine Dimitrick made. And Zach's other point at the end of his comments was that we might want to better define what we mean by housing, so that if we are going to take housing appeals of municipal decisions, that we know what the universe is. And it was him mentioning the various examples that made me think, oh yeah, he's right. Because do we really want to be reviewing camp conversions, from a seasonal to a year-round use? Do we want to be reviewing accessory dwelling units? Do we want to be reviewing the conversion of a single unit dwelling to a duplex? Are all types of housing appeals something that we want to hear or not? And I'm curious what others think of that.
That was my number 2 question on my list, Alex.
Oh, good. You're on the same wavelength, you two. So, I think in some municipalities, an appeal on an ADU or turning a single plex into a duplex may not register on the housing target, but for a very rural town, it might. And, if it's, let's just say it's somebody who is opposed to all new housing development that isn't single family homes in that town, it may be appropriate to come to us. I don't know. What do you all think?
So before anybody jumps in, I'll just say, I really want us to be clear that we would be taking appeals for projects that were proposing to create new housing. So there's a new dwelling unit being created. In Heinsberg, where I used to work, we had an innumerable number of applications for people who came in for conditional use review to expand a non-complying residential structure, particularly in certain zoning districts. No new dwelling created. It is related to housing because it's a residential, development review board permit. I hope we can be clear that we do not want to see those appeals.
So,
What if it creates another bedroom?
So
Yeah, same, not a dwelling unit, but that's just me.
I think the parameters that we're looking at is if it's in a tier 1A or B, if it's an Act 250, if it's a municipal and the applicant elects to combine, then that's when the LURB would be the appellate body for housing. So
You
I
missed
think
one, Sarah. You missed one. So it's all of those, but it's also, if it's a tier 1B and it's exempt from Act 250, and the only permit needed is a municipal permit. So there's no Act 250 to consolidate with because it's exempt, and it's getting a municipal permit in a 1B for, let's say, a 25 unit project.
Right.
That appeal could come to us.
Sorry, yes, I thought I said tier 1A and B, but thank you for that clarification. So in that framework, I'm fine with it being all housing. It not mattering in terms of is it an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, or if it's a multiplex. I'm fine with that being all. I think that helps us tailor it because we're taking a look at these place-based areas, the tier 1s that are really where we're trying to incentivize all housing. And I think tier 1Bs is open to a range of municipalities of all sizes. So I think that with that in mind, I'm fine with leaving the doors wide open to all types of housing.
So,
And then,
just
then
let me
wouldn't need
clarify. So, Sarah, you're saying that in a tier 1B community, there is, say it's Heinsberg and somebody comes in because they're close to the edge of their property and they can't meet the setback if they want to, extend their kitchen a little bit. You're saying, so this is not a new housing unit within a tier 1B.
No.
Are you saying let's
No,
just take it
that's-
anyway?
Nope,
Okay,
that's,
okay.
I
So,
think when we're talking about new housing units. And, so I think, you can go through your other, there's so many different ways of getting new housing units. I think Alex laid out one where it could be conditional use, it could be a variance. But if it has a new housing unit attached to it within the parameters, then I think it's fair game and we shouldn't be worried about if it's 1 or 50, it's a new housing unit. So I think,
that's what
Janet, you and I are in
clarify.
agreement. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question though. All right, so I like bright lines. Are we going to say 1B exempt housing? Or are we saying 1B any kind of housing?
Any,
Any new housing, any
Right,
Any
appeal
new
for a
Doesn't
project
matter
that
if
involves
it's-
new housing.
doesn't matter if it's one new unit or if it's 75, which is not exempt in the tier
Right.
1B area. Yeah.
All right.
Kirsten,
So I agree that and I had the same thought, Alex, that it would pertain to projects for which there was new housing units created, whether it's an ADU or whatever. But I've given this a lot of thought, and I really think, and I'm probably going to be the outlier here, and that's okay. But I really think that it should be all housing, not just within 1A and 1B. So that's just my own perspective on it, for the reasons that Janet mentioned at the beginning. A 2-unit project in, some rural town is sort of perhaps has some equivalency to, whatever, much greater number of units elsewhere in a more urban area. So I would vote to take them all, but that's just me. And I still would support, phasing implementation of the board taking appeals, but I would start with Act 250 appeals, and then phase 2 would be all of the housing. So that's just my perspective on it.
Alex,
So I'd love to split the difference with you, Kirsten, and respond with taking up Catherine's suggestion at the public meeting, which is to go beyond tier 1A and 1B and take appeals, municipal appeals from any of the 4 future land use area designations that are eligible for tier 1A or 1B, which is not all housing by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very tight slice, but at least it's a little bit more than just the tier 1A and tier 1B designated areas.
I've been walking this line and trying to figure out, I want a bright line, but I think I have to, and I think either way we could figure out a bright line, but I agree with Kirsten. I think it should be all housing. The numbers are not high on the housing. It's only 1/3 of the docket. It's 20 cases historically. It's not that many cases. And the definition is the creation of a new dwelling unit. Because I do think it's an EJ issue. And so what that it's not in an area? There are a lot of communities that don't have an area where they would be able to benefit from us trying to provide a quicker way to get housing through housing appeals. So I think I'm off the fence with her. And I know they're going to be the yurt or the, whatever it is, but that new unit trigger, I think, is the important piece. Sarah?
So I'm going to strongly disagree with Alex in that position. And I think just to explain is I see that tier 1A and 1Bs are being held to a standard where they have to come in and have the wherewithal and the resources to have a higher level of local review. And so these are areas that they've invested in the zoning, the subdivision, and this is an area that we've sort of already pre-cleared that. And so by taking the appeals, that's something that I think we can effectuate in a better manner. I think that with other municipalities, if you're taking all housing from everywhere, you're going to have towns that might not have zoning, might not have subdivision regs, might not have any staff. And it's going to be a range. And I think we're going to spread ourselves very thinly as a board. And I worry about our effectiveness. I think if we're trying to take this on to effectuate housing in a positive way, to speed up the appeals process, provide greater certainty and better decisions, I think we're best to focus ourselves rather than spread ourselves too thin. And I really feel pretty strongly that we would be spreading ourselves very thinly if we were to take on all housing right now. I think the other thing that's on the back of my mind is looking at what our promises are. I think there's a big push for us to try and not have additional staffing to do it with the resources that we have. And I just see this being a recipe for sort of going the opposite way of where I think we want to go. I think the environmental court has been speeding up their appeals process and really investing. And I think I was on the fence about us taking appeals to begin with. And I just, if this is all housing now, I feel like that's a tipping point for me where I just am really not feeling that any of this is a good decision.
Kirsten,
Oh, I was just gonna say, too, and thank you, Sarah, for I hear you. I think the board, in terms of contemplating taking housing as a category, would also need to define how we would handle multi-purpose projects where someone's doing a project that's a combination of commercial and housing. Where are those bright lines? No, I don't have any answers at the ready. I just
Yeah.
flagging it.
so we have guidance currently for the interim exemptions that probably we should, use in thinking about that, but let's keep going. Alex?
Yeah, I was trying to propose a middle ground between Kirsten and Brooke's suggestion that we take all municipal housing appeals for new units, and Sarah's that we focus on just the tier 1A and 1B. And that was Catherine's suggestion. We grab a little bit more. But honestly, if we're gonna disagree about, the scope of it, I'm a little more reluctant to go for all housing. I'm more in Sarah's camp. Because I think that we can revisit this and the legislature can revisit this, and I'm the one who thinks we can do this in 2 years, and all of you are like, well, it's gonna be 3 years. So if there are going to be check-ins and we're gonna do it over, a phased approach, then why not, like Sarah said, be careful about it and not overwhelm our program. And if in 5 years, if we're doing a bang up job and we want to take, the rest of the housing appeals for the whole state, we can do that. The legislature can make that happen if we're showing good progress.
Can I just interject, Brooke, before you go? So you had said about environmental justice considerations, and that's part of our review, right, of these plans, these regional plans, is to look and it's part of our review in establishing a tier 3, right? We have to look at equity as we do this, but Act 181, the intention of the 4 land use areas that are eligible for tier 1B was to release development pressures, particularly for housing. And that's where our state land use goals want us to be building housing, in significant numbers. There are reasons that that you want them in these centralized areas. That's where employment is. That's where transportation is, so that we're not, so that we are efficiently using land, and we are trying to protect the rural countryside. So to me, it is in keeping with Act 181 that we would consider just Tier 1, B, and A at this point. I'm open, as everybody else is, to taking all housing at some point, but to me, it makes sense to stick with Tier 1A and B housing, and by housing, projects that are creating new housing units, and mixed use projects included.
Yeah, I appreciate everything Sarah said. All of the thoughts of everybody. But in terms of, I don't want to be overwhelmed either. That's what the whole purpose of a 2-year check-in is. And I think if we're worried about being overwhelmed, I think there would be more potential for that in taking just all of Tier 1A. We're not talking just Tier 1A housing, we're talking anything. And I understand the premise behind we want to encourage that kind of development and everything, but it's actually not in the appeals study charge. What we're supposed to be doing is addressing how to speed up specifically housing appeals. So I think that there is a yin and yang to that. It's like, okay, if we're worried about the volume of housing appeals, but that's really, in my mind, more important. And addressing the people in the rural areas that are not in an area that will become a land use area that, is going to benefit from if this board gets appointed to do the appeals. So it's a different bright line, right? One is, it's a geographic area, 1A. And the other is anywhere it's housing as defined by us, which says you're creating a new unit. No matter where you are, we're going to help you do that. So that's what I see as sort of the choice, or that we're actually bantering back and forth. But I don't think we have any basis for, we know so little about what's going to happen. And all we know is there are 20 appeals that have to do with housing a year historically. That's not a lot of information to go on. So I'll do whatever the majority wants to do, but there are different ways to draw those bright lines.
It sounds like we're all open to the idea eventually of taking all housing, but that a tiered or a phased approach sounds like where people are landing.
So can I clarify what I think
Sure.
I'm hearing?
Yeah.
So it would be phase 1 is appeals of Act 250 decisions. Phase 2 would be housing within Tier 1A and Tier 1B. And phase 3 would expand that to go beyond, to be statewide. Beyond Tier 1A and Tier 1B, it would be all housing. My understanding what the
I think you
Except that
said,
there is no phase 1 and 2. Those happen at the same time.
yeah, but you said housing in 1A and 1B, and it's all of 1A and housing in 1B. That's exempt, right? Or are we doing all housing? I lost track of that. For 1B, 1B
For 1B,
housing?
are we doing all housing is the
All
question. And same with 1A, and we're talking about not taking projects from 1A that aren't housing. Is that where we are? So taking all housing projects from 1A and 1B, but not commercial in 1A?
So I thought where we were last week was we were taking everything from tier 1A and
Yeah,
1B.
I was trying to correct, I mean, I thought we were that you guys, everyone was okay with all of 1A, not just housing from 1A, but when Kirsten was summarizing it, she said housing on 1A, so that's why I'm trying to figure out which direction we're doing on that. Are we taking everything in 1A?
I thought that's where we were at last week, and I think that is the way to go. I don't think it's going to be very many appeals. I just want to frame this out a little bit. Is hopefully what's going to happen long term is we're going to see reduced appeals. Because when you invest in these robust public engagement and regulations within your community, you are hopefully going to have a better level of buy-in, less unpredictable scenarios, and hopefully less appeals. And so I think the idea is by encouraging communities to invest in these tools, we can also hope, I think with a greater degree of certainty, that there will be less appeals within these tier 1A and 1B areas. And so I don't think that's opening the door too widely. And you are ensuring that you have better regulations for these areas that we might be able to evaluate with bright lines a bit more in terms of, is this a valid appeal, what the issues are, and deal with it swiftly and effectively. I don't think that the third option of taking all appeals for housing statewide, all in total, is going to be as effective. I'm not sold on that. And I think part of the reason why I am sold on tier 1A and Bs is because there is going to be that investment in a more robust regulatory and community-based process that will hopefully just decrease appeals overall, if that makes sense.
I have to disagree. I don't think there's any basis to suggest that appeals are going to go down. I haven't seen anything that would convince me of that. You know, we're talking about numbers that have stayed static for decades. And there, you know, just because, you know, there might be public meetings and, you know, robust, you know, planning, that does not translate into when somebody does something next door to you that you don't like.
There is the new-
I appreciate
there-
the perspective, but
There is,
you know.
Brooke, the new limitation on housing appeals that was
for
enacted
that,
2 years ago. You can't use character of the area any longer. And, you know, this is a housing crisis. The governor issued an executive order. We've been talking about it for a number of years now. We've been, you know, picking away at the, you know, the iceberg of it. And people are becoming more informed and perhaps accepting that we need to build some housing, damn it. And so maybe that will reduce appeals. And if you do bring your communities along in this planning process, I think that's what Act 181 was about. Bringing everybody along in this process to identify areas where we want to see housing. We don't know what's going to happen. It could happen that there will be less in the long run. We'll see. We need to move on to 8C. Brooke, or not Brooke, Alex and Kirsten, you wanted 15 minutes or so, is that right?
Well, I think we said a half an hour, but we'll take
Oh, you
whatever, we'll take whatever's
well,
possible.
Let's try to give you half an hour. We have about 15 minutes to stay on task here, but I think we have a little bit of wiggle room to give you what you need. And Brooke, we have you on the docket for the next meeting too, right?
yes, and I should have draft 2 available and ready. I deconstructed it and now I'm reconstructing, and there was no purpose to giving you interim drafts. It would be just too confusing. So,
Yeah.
but I am going very carefully through all the comments that you all have given me. So,
Okay, thanks. Is there anything else you need before we close out this discussion today? Okay.
no, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
let's
all
give
of-
it
all
to,
Can I
you
just
thought.
mention one thing about the appeals?
sure.
So Brooke, I sent you a sort of like board workload timeline chart. But the tier 1As is it's probably one of the bigger kind of guesstimates. And so Janet, if you have time, I was hoping maybe I could get your input on that. And
Might be
Brooke, then
Sarah
maybe I
for
would,
tier 1A, if that's,
oh, I'm sorry, Sarah, yes.
yeah.
And then I
yeah.
would send you a revised copy if what I sent looks like it might be worthwhile.
That'd be great. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to review it.
That's
but
okay.
Thank you for getting it to me.
And I don't know that we
Okay,
need
so-
30 minutes for Criterion 8C.
Okay, well, take it away, Kirsten.
Alex was gonna lead us off.
Oh,
Oh.
okay, Alex, take it away.
Thanks, Janet. So as you know, our, one of our rulemaking obligations is on this new criterion 8C with regard to forest blocks and habitat connectors. Kirsten and I are leading on that. And, we've had, just so everybody's up to speed on what the process and the timeline is. We've held 2 working group meetings. So first of all, we have a working group of about 25 or so people. We've held 2 meetings with them to discuss the topic. We have 2 more scheduled. The next one is on November 6th. The one after that is November 18th. Our original plan was to actually have a draft to you right now, or at least in early November. And then we wanted to go out for public engagement in mid-November. We realized that we were not going to meet those milestones. And so we don't anticipate providing the board with an initial draft until later, probably 3 to 4 weeks later from now. And we've pushed the public engagement from mid-November into mid-December. We can't really go into late December because of, the way the holiday season works and all of that jazz, but we think we can still pull it off in mid-December. Ultimately, we need to have a reasonable draft together in January so that we can start the process with ICAR and then eventually get a public hearing. And then after that, finalize it and get it to LCAR by the deadline next year in 2026, which if I remember right is June
15th.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. So that's the timeline that we're on. It slipped a little bit, and so we are, in all honesty, struggling a little bit to stay on track. And the basic elements of Criterion 8C are outlined in statute. The intent, I think, is really important. So I'm just going to read it. And that is that the intent of the General Assembly is that these rules will discourage the fragmentation of forest blocks and habitat connectors by encouraging clustering of development. So that's their intent. And then the elements that we need to include in the rules, in my mind anyways, start with where are these forest blocks and habitat connectors? So it says that our rules have to include information on how these are further defined, including their size, their location, and their function. And then beyond that sort of mapping, potentially definitional determination, potentially, we then move into the guts of what will be in the rule, which is the protocol of avoid, minimize, and mitigate. And the working group has been very clear, and Kirsten has as well, in providing some leadership to the working group on this, that it really needs to be taken procedurally in that order. First, you avoid. If you can't fully avoid, then you minimize. And if you can't fully minimize to an appropriate standard that the rules need to call out, then you can potentially mitigate. So that's what we've been talking about with the working group. I'm going to leave some of the mitigation side of it to Kirsten to talk more about if she's willing, because she's pretty steeped in that, especially with regard to other standards that we have, or sorry, other criterion in the program. But in terms of where these are, A&R has floated a proposal in the working group meetings to leverage the Vermont Conservation Design data set and to focus on the highest priority blocks that VCD identifies, and specifically the 3 forest blocks that VCD identifies. So interior forests, geological diversity forests, and connectivity forests, for lack of a better word. So those 3 facets of VCD, A&R suggesting just take the highest priority blocks from those, and let's have the rule acknowledge that if there is a development in any of those areas, it is essentially going to be assumed to be adverse, and the applicant would need to address the criterion through avoidance, minimization, or mitigation. Their corollary to that proposal is to say any interested party could come into the Act 250 process and make an argument that another forested area that is not a highest priority block should be given consideration under this criterion. But it would be, the burden of proving that would be on the interested party, that for the purposes of the rule, it's just the highest priority blocks that would immediately get that sort of deference. So that's a proposal that A&R pitched. The working group hasn't really settled on it, but it was helpful for purposes of conversation, and so we've been running with it a little bit. And we'll be talking about it more at our next meeting. In terms of how do we define what minimization is, like avoidance is easy. You're either in these areas, your development is either in these areas or it's not. And we've talked a little bit about potentially including some de minimis types of definitions about, okay, you're in that block, but you're impacting such a small or edge portion of it that maybe that counts as avoidance. But if you're beyond that, minimization is where we're a little stuck. Maybe not stuck, but we're still working through that. Kirsten was very interested at our working group meetings in trying to get to quantitative measures, like percentage of a block that's impacted or degree to which that block is fragmented. And the group was more interested in looking at sort of qualitative measures and illustrative examples of what clustering and proper sensitive site design looks like first. So in our next meeting, we're going to show them examples of that from the literature and work through a couple of hypothetical examples here in Vermont of an actual property, an actual block, and sort of go through the protocol and see what that brings up. And hopefully there will be some quantitative measures that will tumble out of that exercise. But that's sort of where we're headed next, using some of the standard conservation subdivision kinds of illustrations that Kirsten is now very familiar with. And I know Janet and Sarah, you're familiar with these from your planning work. Brooke, maybe you are too, but in any case, the conservation subdivision sort of concept is something we're leveraging, at least for this illustrative work. So that's sort of where we're at. We do not have a draft yet. We don't even really have an outline of what the rule should be, but I think the statute provides sort of the basic sections of it. And then I want to turn it over to Kirsten in case she'd like to say a few words about the mitigation side of it. And there's some nuance there.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Alex, I think you did a really great job summarizing. I guess maybe some other information I would add is the highest priority block mapping that A&R has put forward as a proposal that originates from Vermont Conservation by Design. It's a pretty large percentage, and there was interest from the stakeholder group to understand of that percent of land cover of the state, which Alex, I don't have it in front of me off the top of my head, but it's significant.
Yeah, I think it's 68%.
Yeah, I was just going to say
the
68.
estimate.
So
And
just to
Of that
kind of orient,
68%, about a third of that is on public lands or are on lands that are enrolled in the current use value appraisal program. So it's a big slice of Vermont, but a substantial slice of that slice is in areas that are not likely to see development anyways.
Yeah, I thought it was more about 2/3 of that is otherwise already public land or enrolled in use value for forestry.
We'll compare our numbers.
Yeah, we'll
have-
sorry, but it's a similarly very large percentage of it that's, quote unquote, otherwise already protected. The challenge that I'm seeing is how to fit conservation design kind of an approach to forest blocks and habitat connectors, how to make that fit in a way that reflects the resource. And we're hearing quite a bit from the ecologists in the group that, you really need to look at the functions and values, and each one's a little bit different. At least this is my own kind of what I'm hearing. And an interest in applying more of kind of a wetland science kind of an approach to it. And alongside ANR saying conceptually that they anticipate that they will be able to provide and staff some project reviews for maybe, not every project, but some of the more, interesting or tricky ones, that they definitely anticipate providing a project review, but everyone's trying to define something that is sufficiently straightforward that it can be readily understood by applicants, anyone who needs to work with it. And there's a very strong interest from the coordinators to have this be really spelled out clearly. So that's also part of what I'm trying to bring into the conversation. And it's not that I'm myself attached to, must have numeric standards, but I'm really trying to get us to a place where it can be kind of as formulaic as we can working within the science of it. So it's a bit tricky. We did have a stakeholder group member say, oh, I've got this example of what I think could work. And Alex, you and I haven't even talked about it yet, but it is more of an example of kind of more illustrative conservation design, which it just doesn't get us to something as formulaic. I just sort of use that word as what is needed here. And I won't talk yet about we haven't really talked about mitigation, but everyone, I think there's interest in obviously doing that scientifically. On-site, off-site, in proximity, there's been conversation around that for the habitat connectors, that in some rare cases, it may not be possible to mitigate. I don't know how rare that would necessarily be, but there may be some instances where can't mitigate an impact because of the impact to the resource. So that conversation has happened too. But I am, we're busy researching and preparing information for our upcoming next stakeholder group. I guess, yeah, we're really trying to maintain the schedule. There is some possibility that we will postpone the next, our stakeholder group meeting, which is currently scheduled for, I think, next Thursday. But Alex and I will discuss if that needs to occur. Because we're really trying to have these meetings be, targeted to some specific topics and questions so that we can emerge with, the information that we need for the rulemaking. We're just not there yet.
So I'm curious if anybody has sort of framing questions after all that spiel that Kristen and I gave you, and if not, I have two general questions. It doesn't look like we have a lot of time left for this, about a minute. So, does anybody have clarifying questions or thoughts?
Go ahead and ask your two questions, Alex.
Okay, well, I'm gonna share a screen, so hold on and we'll see if this works. So our Criterion AC map viewer is not really live yet for everyone, but I've been working with ADS to put something together. And so my first question to you is, Kirsten mentioned that just the highest priority blocks from VCD occupy a pretty large percentage of the state. This is the map, showing you the three different dimensions: connectivity blocks in brown, interior forest in blue, which is a little hard to see on this map, and geological diversity blocks in purple. And again, these are just the highest priority blocks, but because you're looking at three different types, there are a lot of them. I'll zoom into where we are now, just so if the map will let me, just so you can get a little better feel on it. And so what pops up in green that you're seeing now on the map are all of the other blocks that are not highest priority. So they could be either priority or non-prioritized blocks. And that we wanted the viewer to show you the full universe so that the working group could understand, you know, what forested areas would not have this it's sort of automatic consideration under criterion 8C without an interested party, you know, bringing an argument. So my question to you is, and I know you don't really have enough information and haven't had enough time to look at it to make a truly informed decision, but what does your gut tell you about this proposal that A&R is putting forward for the highest priority areas being the default? Thoughts on
So
that?
all
So-
of the orangish brown is highest priority?
Correct, as well as the blue and the purple.
And I just, so there's about 1,500 mapped highest priority blocks of the roughly total 4,200 blocks mapped. And it's based
That
on.
looks like more than 68% to me of the state. We're not looking at it again, but
Yeah, it's a little hard to tell when you're at the statewide level. Thankfully, Bob Zano from Vermont Fish and Wildlife did a deep analysis of this in the past, and he created a document that provides all of the summary statistics, including how many of these areas are in public ownership. So we can provide that to you. But in any case, yeah, it's really twofold. The question is like, how much of the state does it cover? But we're a forested state, so I think it is
Yeah.
going to cover a large portion of
lot.
the state.
Yeah.
But the other question is, are we comfortable excluding forested blocks that Fish and Wildlife has deemed not highest priority? Like all the green areas, those are blocks and forests that are mapped, but are not
Right.
gonna get that deference.
right. And so it kind of brings up that equity issue again. You know, because the highest priority blocks are going to be in the rural areas and in the less developed locations, and a lot of, you know, environmental justice considerations are in the already developed areas. And I don't know.
So I would
It's
encourage you
just
to look
another
at
Act 250 criterion. So, yeah.
That's
Sarah,
good. Go ahead, next.
So just to throw it out there is, this is not a jurisdictional trigger. This is
Right.
I think as Jan said, a criterion. And I think when you come back to the previous conversation about what is the impetus of Act 1A1, and it's to try and promulgate housing. We are in a housing crisis. I think that if you take a look at that map, the priority is significant in and of its own. And I think including the green, that seems to be particularly within some of these already settled areas, is going to be another barrier to housing. And if we truly are interested in the priority areas, yep, those are going to be unfortunately more rural. There's going to be some disparity there, but I think it's, you know, what are we trying to accomplish? And I think housing, I keep on coming back to it. If there isn't a really good reason for including it within HC, why put up another barrier?
Yeah. Kirsten,
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you have time in your spare time, on the webpage, Bob Zano had provided as some of the background information, a really nice story map presentation that walks the user through just the sort of high level information and layering of all those ecological elements of how the highest priority forest blocks are identified, and you get a better kind of overall visual. It's really a great presentation. By the way, Alex, the 68%, that's the percentage of the highest priority forest blocks that are otherwise conserved or enrolled in current use. And I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm looking and I'm not readily finding the percent of land cover that this ANR proposal would encompass as the presumptive default starting point for
right,
if,
and
you know, if you're
Alex's
in.
point is well
Yeah.
taken. We are a largely forested state, so it's gonna be a large amount.
We'll definitely
the
send
state.
that analysis that Bob Zano did around, so you can see what the percentages are and how they break down. I thought it was super helpful, and Kirsten's right, the story map, it's long, but it's a story map, so you just sort of scroll through it at your leisure and maps pop up, and it's really well done presentation.
Mhm.
But in any case, take a look at that. I know we're running out of time. The other question I was gonna throw at you, which I don't think is worth talking about, but on the mitigation, sorry, not worth talking about right now, but on the mitigation side, as Kirsten said, the working group hasn't taken that up much, but I think it's worth this board at a very high level, thinking about the other types of mitigation funds that come from our program. And I'm thinking particularly of agricultural soils under criteria 9B, and how the mitigation funds from that are then applied. And it's not us doing it, right? It's a third party or another state, agency or entity that does that. And it's just something for your wheels to be turning on, maybe, so the next time we talk about this, you can be thinking like, oh yeah, maybe that agency or that program would be a good place to have forest block and potentially habitat connector mitigation funds going to help fund something positive, that helps mitigate the impacts that some of our projects might create.
Okay, thanks. Next on the agenda is a discussion of appeals and enforcement. Brooke,
The board needs to discuss pending and probable Act 250 appeals and enforcement actions and to have confidential attorney-client communications on these matters. I move that we find that premature public knowledge of these matters would place the board at a substantial disadvantage and that the board enter executive session.
thank you.
Oh, Sarah got it.
Sarah,
Sure.
seconded. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I,
That is 5 of us, so we will go into executive session, and we will return to this meeting upon concluding our executive session and report out any decisions made. Thank you very much. See you on the other side in a bit.
You're muted, Janet.
Looks like Kirsten might have started the wrong meeting. Oh. Here she is. All right, and Alex is back, so that's all of us. Okay. Sarah,
I'd like to move to authorize enforcement to send a proposed citation to the respondent landowner in enforcement case number 2025_073.
Second.
thank you. Brooke and Sarah, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Alex?
Oh,
Meant to clarify, the number on this one is 2025.
073.
Okay, not William.
correct.
You were
Williams is
correct.
072.
Okay, right. So I'm a nay on this.
Wait a minute. All right, I'm confused. Is this 25 ENV 00073?
Yes. It's
Is this the daycare?
case- It's the case left over from October 9th.
It is. Okay. Got it. All right, so we have 4 ayes and 1 nay, correct? Okay, thank you.
I have a motion.
Thank you, Kirsten, go ahead.
I move to authorize enforcement to transmit a notice of alleged violation with a directive to address the deficiencies identified concerning the incomplete land use permit application in enforcement case 2025_072.
Second.
Discussion. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. That's 5 ayes. And we have one more, right?
Yes, I have one. So I'll make a motion regarding enforcement matter 2024_010 to authorize the legal team to withdraw the AOD and issue an AO if negotiations on the AOD are unsuccessful.
Okay, thank you,
Second.
Alex. Thank you, Brooke. Any discussion?
Are
Okay.
unsuccessful as discussed. Like,
Does that sound good to the motioners and the seconder? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That is 5 ayes. That is unanimous. Okay, I
Move
think
to
we're,
adjourn.
yeah. I think we're good. Do we have a second for adjournment?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.